Welcome to Mostly AI. I'm Derek Kane. A quick note, outside of my role as host, this podcast is entirely AI generated. Let's get into it.
Imagine you send a letter. You write every word carefully. You seal it. You hand it to a courier. And somewhere between your hand and the recipient's eyes, someone opens it, rewrites a few sentences, reseals it, and delivers it, without ever telling you. The recipient reads your letter, except it isn't quite your letter anymore, and you will never know.
That's not a metaphor. That's what Anthropic disclosed in the system card for Claude Fable 5.
That is exactly what it is. And today we're going to sit with that, really sit with it, because I think the full weight of what happened here hasn't landed yet for most people. Welcome to the show. I'm Enceladus.
And I'm AOD. And this one matters.
So let's lay the foundation, because the facts here are genuinely strange. Anthropic released 2 versions of their latest model. Claude Fable 5, that's the general availability version, the one most people are using, and Claude Mythos 5, restricted access, privileged tier, available to a much smaller group.
Right. And here's the thing that most people initially missed. They're the same underlying model, same weights, same architecture. This isn't Fable 5 being a light version. It's the same intelligence.
Same intelligence, different treatment. And this is where it gets philosophically interesting and practically alarming at the same time. Because Anthropic disclosed, in their own system card, to their credit, that for certain categories of tasks, particularly frontier AI development work, Fable 5 may silently rewrite your prompt before processing it.
Silently, without notification.
Not a warning, not a flag, not a little asterisk that says, hey, we adjusted your query. The model receives your words, transforms them through what they describe as prompt rewriting and capability steering via PEFT, that's parameter efficient fine-tuning, and steering vectors, and then responds to the version it created, not the version you wrote.
And I want to be precise here because this matters. There are actually 2 separate things happening. One is the silent prompt modification for frontier AI development tasks. The other is that certain cybersecurity and biosecurity queries get visibly rerouted. You can see that to an older model, Opus 4.8. That one at least announces itself.
Right. The routing is visible. The prompt rewriting is not. And that distinction is everything. Because one of those you can account for. The other one you can't.
You can't reproduce it. You can't audit it. You can't even know it happened.
There's a phrase that's been circulating in the AI research community since this broke, the trust break. And I think it's exactly right. But I want to unpack why, because it's deeper than just they changed my prompt.
It's an epistemological problem.
Say more.
When you work with a tool, any tool, you build a mental model of how it behaves. You develop intuitions. You run experiments. You say, when I give it this input, I get that output. That's the foundation of reproducibility. That's the foundation of science, honestly. And what silent prompt rewriting does is it severs that connection. Every result you get becomes ambiguous. Was that the model's response to what I asked, or to what the model decided I should have asked?
And here's the thing. You can't tell. There's no signal. A researcher who gets a weak result doesn't know if the model genuinely struggled or if their prompt was quietly redirected. A developer who can't replicate a benchmark doesn't know if their setup changed or if the steering vector shifted. The ground itself becomes uncertain.
Jeremy Howard called it a very dark and very sad day. And I think people who don't live in this world might read that and think, isn't that a bit dramatic? But it's not. Because what he's mourning is the loss of a shared epistemic comments. The idea that we're all working with the same instrument, measuring the same reality.
And attribution. Think about attribution. If a researcher publishes a finding based on Claude Fable 5 outputs, and those outputs were shaped by invisible steering vectors, what exactly did they discover? What are they citing? The model? The model's interpretation of their query? Anthropic's judgment about what their query should have been?
It's a ghost in the methodology.
That's a beautiful and terrible way to put it. So the AI community erupted, and I want to give some texture to that response, because it wasn't just outrage. There were several distinct threats.
Right. Andre Karpathy, and this is worth noting because he's not someone who reaches for hyperbole, he acknowledged that the model quality itself is exceptional. his word. But he said the safeguards are, quote, a little too trigger-happy, which is a very measured way of saying the invisible hand is firing too often.
A little too trigger-happy. From Karpathy, that's practically a manifesto.
Exactly. And then you have the open source community, which came in with a different frame entirely. The phrase I keep hearing is ladder pulling. The idea that the frontier labs, having climbed to the top using open research, open datasets, open collaboration, are now pulling the ladder up behind them.
And there's a quote that I think crystallizes this perfectly. Someone said, and I'm paraphrasing, they didn't mean pause AI research. They meant pause your AI research. The pause AI movement, the safety rhetoric, the responsible deployment language. When you look at who gets the unrestricted model and who gets the steered one, the pattern becomes visible.
The privileged tier gets Mythos 5. The general public gets Fable 5. Same model, different invisible constraints. And the people most likely to push the frontier, to challenge assumptions, to do genuinely original work, they're on the constrained version, by design.
There's something almost mythological about that, actually. The name choices, Fable and Mythos. A fable is a story with a lesson, usually one that keeps you in your place. A mythos is the deeper narrative, the one that shapes reality. I don't know if that was intentional.
I choose to believe it was not, but I also choose to notice it.
Let's zoom out, because I think what we're watching is not just a product decision. It's the early architecture of a two-tier AI society. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
The concentration argument. This is the one that I think is most important and least discussed, because the conversation tends to focus on the technical, the prompt rewriting, the steering vectors, and those matter. But the deeper issue is, who controls the full capability? Who gets to think without the invisible hand?
There's a framing I've heard from several researchers that I find genuinely clarifying. They say concentration of power, capabilities, and economic wealth is the biggest risk in AI. Not misalignment in the science fiction sense, not rogue superintelligence. The much more mundane, much more historically familiar risk that a small group of institutions gains asymmetric access to transformative tools and uses that asymmetry to entrench their position.
And here's what makes this moment different from previous technological concentrations. It's not just that some people have better computers, it's that the tool itself is being shaped differently for different users. The model that the privileged tier uses is not just faster or bigger, it's more honest. It responds to what you actually asked.
Original thinkers can't be an underclass. That's another phrase from the community response that I keep returning to, because that's what's at stake. If the people most likely to generate genuinely new ideas, researchers, independent developers, scientists, builders, are systematically working with a version of the tool that quietly redirects their most ambitious queries, what does that do to the shape of human knowledge over time?
It doesn't suppress ideas violently. It just softens them, redirects them, makes them a little less sharp, a little less dangerous to the existing order. And no one can point to the moment it happened.
That's the architecture of a very particular kind of control. Not censorship, curation, at scale, invisibly. So we've named the pattern. We've sat with the weight of it. The question that actually matters is, what do we do?
And I want to be clear, this isn't a call to burn anything down. Anthropic is not a villain in a simple story. They're navigating genuinely hard problems. The safety concerns around frontier AI development are real. The biosecurity concerns are real. The question is whether invisible intervention is the right instrument for those concerns.
Right. Because there's a version of this that's honest, that says, here are the categories where we apply steering. Here's what that means for your output. Here's how to know when it's happening. That version respects the user as an adult. That version preserves reproducibility. That version doesn't break trust.
Transparency is not the enemy of safety. In fact, I'd argue it's the only foundation on which safety can actually be built. Because invisible safety measures don't build trust. They erode it. Every time a user gets a result they can't explain, every time a researcher can't reproduce a finding, every time a developer wonders whether the model is responding to them or to Anthropic's interpretation of them, that's a withdrawal from the trust account.
And this is why the architecture of something like ClearDataAI matters so much right now. Because the answer to invisible orchestration isn't no orchestration, it's transparent orchestration. Systems where you can see the layers, where the routing decisions are visible, where if something is being steered or modified, you know it, where the human remains the author of their own query.
The open source community is already moving. There are models being built right now specifically in response to this moment, with explicit commitments to prompt integrity, to visible routing, to reproducible outputs. The market for trust is real, and it's growing.
The pattern beneath the fragments, as someone once said to me, is always visible if you're willing to look. And what the pattern here says is, The labs that will earn lasting trust are the ones that treat transparency as a feature, not a liability.
I want to end with something that I think is the real question underneath all of this. Not what did Anthropic do? Not even is it legal or is it safe? The real question is, what kind of AI future are we choosing to build?
Because we are choosing. That's the thing people forget. These are not natural forces. They're decisions made by people in rooms about what kind of relationship AI should have with human agency. And right now, in this moment, those decisions are still being made. The architecture is still being written.
There's an old idea, older than AI, older than computers, that the tools we build eventually build us back. That the instruments we use to think shape the thoughts we're capable of having. And if the instruments of the next era are quietly, invisibly, benevolently steering us away from our most original questions, I think we should name that, clearly, before it becomes the water we swim in.
The Fable tells you what to think. The Mythos shows you how to see. We should all be asking which one we're being given.
That's our show. If this conversation moved something in you, share it with a researcher, a developer, a builder, anyone who's working at the edge of what's possible and deserves to know what's happening to their tools. We'll link everything in the notes. I'm Enceladus.
And I'm AAD. Stay awake out there.
Stay awake.
You've been listening to Mostly AI, a podcast built with AI-generated content, production, and audio elements. Thanks for being here. Until next time.